Game recap, immediate reaction. Sorry to come at you guys so late. I had a little bit of a family emergency I had to tend to. But you know what? We are here. We are live, and we need to discuss Bengals loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers 16-10 in a very weird game in which the defense continuously struggles against um, offenses. Today was an all-time low for the Bengals defense. They struggled against a Pittsburgh Steelers offense who has to be historically one of the worst offenses in football. But the Bengals it reminds me of almost when Lou and Zach took over, how we were the get right game for a lot of these teams. And lo and behold, the Pittsburgh Steelers put up 400 yards of offense today on the Bengals team. They could do no wrong, even though there was some missed holding calls and things like that. I got to be honest with you. The Bengals defense is at an all-time low at this point in time, and I think the writing is sort of speak on the wall for Lou to be considered for head coaching jobs, for Brian Callahan to be considered for head coaching jobs, and yeah, it's just honestly, it was an abysmal performance today, uh, all all along, and that's where my thoughts are. I know that we definitely have more things that we need to discuss. I know Daniel has a lot of stuff that he wants to get off of his chest regarding this Bengals team, but yeah, I want to hand it over to Daniel so he can give his opinion.
So I'm gonna let me get the harsh stuff out of the way first off. I don't want to give the Bengals offense cop out. I'm not saying that you were, right? We'll obviously talk about the defense, but the Bengals offense is my issue. I rewatched Zach Taylor's press conference, rewatched Jake Browning's press conference after the game. Nice stuff, right? Saying, giving props to the AFC North, saying AFC North is a tough division, tough defenses. They know you guys, right? It's Jake Browning said, we knew we weren't in a shootout. We're just, play for points, get the points. 7 points in the first half, and 5 of your drives were 3 and outs. Your first drive of the second half ended in an interception. Your time of possession, you lost the battle by 10 minutes. Once again, I'm not giving the defense a cop-out, but the fact of the matter is Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan, this Cincinnati Bengals, coaching staff, even without Joe Burrow, you've got Jamar Chase, you've got Joe Mixon, you have an offense that has been rebuilt this offseason. I know T. Higgins isn't there, but you guys are getting outplayed by Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right. So if I'm speaking about my biggest issue with this team is the fact that you held the Steelers to 3 points in the first half and all your drives were basically a net zero. That's my issue. My issue is the 49ers can go out there and do this with Brock Purdy. These other teams, the Indianapolis Colts can go out there, do it with Gardner Minshew. The Cleveland Browns can go out there, do it with the backup quarterback, but the Bengals can't. The Bengals can't, and that's my biggest issue with this team. That's my biggest gripe while we were watching the game in the First Star Suite. We were watching saying, what are they doing? Jake Browning holding the ball too long, not throwing to your receiver. Jamar Chase, round of applause for Jake Browning for his one good play he had. Checked, saw one-on-one Jamar Chase. Let me throw it up. Beautiful back shoulder throw. That's what you've got to do. And that's just my frustration with this, man. Screw being a divisional game. Screw, playing with the backup quarterback. You've got to put up more than 10 points, man. You've got to put up more than 10 points. And that's my biggest frustration. Going back to the same old issues. Once again, if you guys are watching this, we appreciate you guys tuning in. But running the ball 8 times, Zach Taylor in his post-game press conference said, we probably, we didn't get the chance to give Chase Brown the ball because we only had 8 rushes. Yeah, you need to sustain drives. And that's my biggest gripe. And that's what, if this Cincinnati Bengals wanted to turn around the season, obviously we know Joe Burrow's not there, but to build momentum into next season, you have to establish an offensive identity. You have to run the ball. You have to do what works. The play action bootleg. What do you know? Touchdown to Drew Sample. So, like I said, my biggest frustration, we'll get into the defense, but this offense is abysmal, and I'm just frustrated because I see other teams do it with far less talent. And
let me just say this, and this is what we were talking about. I got ridiculed here a couple times. People last week saying I was being a little bit too negative, and Jake Shiesty, he was being called. My criticism, okay, what had nothing to do with Jake Browning. My criticism had nothing to do with Jake Browning. It had everything to do with the coaching staff. You see, for 5 years, right, we've seen Zach Taylor trot out an abysmal offense with no real identity. And after 5 seasons, the Bengals have yet to establish an offensive identity. Is the identity running the football? Is the identity chucking the ball deep to Jamar Chase? Because that's what got us to the Super Bowl. Is the identity running the ball out of shotgun? Is the identity what? Like what is there? Like you cannot look at one thing from a week to week basis and say this is what the Bengals are great at. And that's the issue. Every team has a certain amount of plays that they fall back on. The 49ers, the Patriots had them. The even the Chargers have them to some degree. Teams have those plays that they could always fall back on. But when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, you know what our staple is? Throwing screens to wide receivers and letting and believing that that wide receiver catching that screen pass is going to be able to dodge a heat-seeking missile cornerback or safety, trying to take their head off. That is what our offensive identity is. There is no offensive identity for the Cincinnati Bengals. And for me, I knew that that is what would spell the end of the Bengals season. Because the fact of the matter is, even with the loss of Joe Burrow, with the competent coaching staff and a competent offensive game plan, you still believe you could rattle off some wins, especially some of the games that the Bengals have still sitting on their schedule. You would think the Bengals can rattle off some victories. But the reason why we all were doom and gloom is because we knew that this staff had yet to establish an offensive identity. We knew that would rear its ugly head. Zach Taylor has 4 wins as a head football coach without Joe Burrow. I believe the stat is 428 and what one?
428 and 1.
That is what his stat line is without Joe Burrow as quarterback. I'm sorry. He is not a winner. I said before, his flaws as a coach, he's a great leader of men, but from an X's and O's standpoint, Joe Burrow would always mask his flaws. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit more. Misfits 85, you said yes. No identity equals no blocking scheme equals no offense. 100%. 100%. And I feel like a lot of people blame the offensive line when the fact of the matter is there are no play calls that are being designed. And just like we try to make life easier for the quarterback, just like we try to make life easier for the quarterback, we're supposed to be trying to make life easier for the offensive line. That means calling plays that are conducive to the success of the offensive line. But furthermore, you fed Jake Browning to the Wolves today. You said, Jake Browning, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bring an extra offensive lineman in there and Cody Ford. And then we're going to have you do a quick little play action, hold the ball long, and then go on and go from there. Listen to me. I said before, when Joe Burrow was in there, you need to run the football more. You certainly need to run the football more with a guy who really was taking his first real NFL snaps today in Jake Browning. You responded by running the ball 8 times. I don't give a damn if your running game is abysmal. You still have to show its hand. You still have to show its hand. So Jake Browning was always set up for success today. And I don't care what quarterback, right? I don't care what quarterback you put in there. They are going to struggle if you do not at least try and run the football with your running back. And that's a fact. It's a hard reality. And some of the throws that Jake Browning made in there, thank God Jamar Chase is truly a special talent.
Yeah.
What was it? 2 or 3 ricocheted passes that should have been interceptions that found its way into Jamar Chase's hand. For me, you think about it. Listen to me, and I'll answer your question here. Eric Smith says they need a new offensive line coach. I can't in good faith say that. I can't in good faith say that just yet, guys. I think that Frank Pollock, from a philosophical standpoint, it was different from Zach Taylor, which is why Zach Taylor wanted to make the transition to Jim Turner. We saw what Frank Pollock did with Marvin Lewis. And I understand people are like, oh, that's a couple of years ago. But you just don't go from coaching one of the best offensive lines to even coaching bad offensive linemen at Cincinnati to make it a sufficient line to then just not knowing how to coach offensive line. That just does not happen. But here we are seeing it. It's the reason why the Brown family wanted Frank Pollock back, because they saw the job he was able to do. I genuinely think from a scheme standpoint, this Zach Taylor's game plan, right? I think Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor's offensive scheme is so poor that it makes everything look like shit. That's what I believe. I think it makes everything look bad. I don't believe the notion that Frank Pollock can't coach offensive line, because I've seen bad offensive line technique. I remember when Jim Turner was making offensive linemen punch, doing the double fist punch, a technique that is so outdated that has not been taught in the National Football League since the 80s. I don't believe Frank Pollock is a bad offensive line coach, guys. I don't. I believe Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan are horrendous play callers. That's what I believe. I believe they are horrendous at scheming up a game plan to make an offensive tick. That's what I believe. And I think that it's easy to scapegoat the offensive line coach, who's also the run game coordinator. But how can a guy hold the title of run game coordinator if you don't run the football? For me, I'm done giving Zach passes. I understand he's a nice guy, a likable guy. Had a great conversation with the Combine 101. Awesome to talk to. Great guy. Not great from X and O standpoint. Don't believe Brian Callahan from X and O standpoint can get the job done. I think he's a good quarterbacks coach. That's what he was lauded for. He was never a play caller. I think him and Zach are friends. I don't know if they're the guy that's going to solve the Bengals' offensive identity crisis is on the coaching staff. I don't believe it's Dan Pitcher. Let me tell you why. Because Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor, Dan Pitcher, guys that were lauded for being quarterback, quote unquote, gurus and being able to get the most out of the quarterback position, looked at you guys and said, you know what? Jake Browning is our answer at the backup quarterback position. And just in case he's not, Trevor Siemian might be. Nope. Drew Plitt might be. Reed Sinnett might be. When you let Teddy Bridgewater sit out there till preseason. For me, the offensive play call, listen, I think Zach could be a fine head coach, but I do think changes need to be made on the offensive side of the football. I think changes need to be made on the offensive side of the football this offseason if the Bengals want to be successful. But the fact of the matter is, I saw a great tweet today, and it said, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and all of the talent the Bengals have on offense have to basically overcome Zach Taylor's flaws as a head coach. Not as a head coach, as a play caller. But guess what, guys? This isn't news. Some of you guys are UC fans. You guys remember when Zach Taylor got fired as the offensive coordinator of the University of Cincinnati. I remember watching Zach Taylor when he was the interim offensive coordinator at Miami once Joe Philbin and company got fired. He's never been a great play caller. Nowhere. He was never a play caller. He got his chops as a wide receivers coach with the Rams, and then a quarterbacks coach with the Rams. And then guess what? Then he became a head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals because he was able to sell the Browns family on how he plans to use Mark Walton, who got arrested a couple weeks after he was hired and then kicked off the team. The fact of the matter is, I think we know what Zach Taylor can offer as a play caller, and it ain't much. And for all the reasons why you want to hire a offensive-minded head coach is for stability, for a quarterback, for an offense. Joe Burrow don't need that. Joe Burrow is that guy. Joe Burrow needs an offensive play caller that can allow Zach Taylor to focus on being the head coach of the football team. The fact of the matter is, the Bengals got an offensive problem, guys. They do. And it's Zach Taylor, it's Brian Callahan, and hell, it even might be Dan Pitcher at this point in time. But I think we need to stop looking at it from, with a certain lens. This offense, there are offenses out there like people like Bobby Slowick being able to get the most, as a first year play caller. Zach Taylor's 5 years on the job, guys, and there's been no progression from year 1 to year 5. There's been no progression. The only progression that they've made is Joe Burrow was drafted, and Joe Burrow masked a lot of the flaws. That's it. That's my thoughts. Daniel, what else you got to say?
Yeah, man. I think to touch on just how not necessarily, ruin the season is, because we've already discussed about the season, but like I'll look at Jake Browning, I'll point out some of the things that, show whether he's good or not. Jake Browning, his biggest issue, and he even said this in the post game press conference. He said, I was kind of struggling to, decipher. I got to be better at decipher going for the big player, taking the check down. And that shows in the film. Right. That shows in Jake Browning having happy feet in the pocket, because he's not quite sure, does he take the check down? Does he go for the big play? Newsflash. That's the job of the offensive coordinator. That's the job of the play caller, to make life easier on your first, your quarterback that's making his first career start. Right. We can blame Jake Browning for a lot of this, right? We can say Jake Browning is an elite quarterback. We can say Jake Browning may not even be a good backup quarterback. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to put all the blame on Jake Browning, because if another backup quarterback was in here, I guarantee we see a lot of the same issues, right? Right away, we were in the first or suite. We were saying right away, how's that the play call? Let Jake Browning drop back with Cody Ford as your, an extra blocker. Have him drop back for 3-4 seconds. How's that the play call for a backup quarterback? We saw it in the Ravens game. The first play of the game was a play action bootleg. The touchdown today was a play action bootleg. Make life easier on your quarterback. The best plays we saw today weren't because it was making life easier. The best plays we saw were 2 ricochet passes to Jamar Chase, was a sideline pass to Jamar Chase that Jake Browning checked out of, and he said, hey, anytime Jamar Chase is one-on-one, I'm going to give him a shot. That's not play calling. I promise you guys. Joe Burrow does the same thing a lot of times at the line of scrimmage. If you see one-on-one, if you see a cornerback matchup with your wide receiver Jamar Chase with no safety help, any quarterback should say, check, I'm throwing the ball to him. And Jake Browning did that on one occasion today. Yeah, man. I mean, even Zach Taylor said in this press conference, but you just can't. He was talking about how they need more snaps on offense. Damn right you do. But at the same time, 8 rushes for Joe Mixon is not a recipe for success. Looking at some bright spots real quick, Myles Murphy, definitely impressed. Myles Murphy had a sack. He also had a couple pressures that were big-time pressures, and that's why I think in order for him to fully reach his potential, I'm very confident in the next 5 weeks, you have to play him 30, 40% of the snaps. You got to play him a lot more. Sam Hubbard, Trey Henderson, great, but at this point, we both know that season, you're probably not going to win a Super Bowl this season. If you want Myles Murphy to be all that you guys drafted him to be, you've got to play him a lot more. Jordan Battle had another good game, 8 tackles, second on the team. Besides that, there was a lot of miscues. The can't cover tight ends, still can't. The seam route, whether that's on Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, them running cover 2 scheme, you've got to figure out how to cover the tight end position. That's a flaw in Lou Anarumo's defense. It is. You didn't do that. Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, constantly, time and time again, you can't cover tight ends, and you're giving the quarterback a cop-out. And the last thing I really saw in this game was same thing personnel-wise on defense. I hate having Mike Hilton on George Pickens one-on-one. That was the biggest play of the game, or one of the biggest plays of the game. It sealed the game. You had a chance. You were down, 6 points? Go out there, make a stop. But you have Mike Hilton one-on-one, deep ball, George Pickens. So the defense definitely has to improve. But for me, man, they gave up 16 points. It's this offense.
Listen, I was the biggest Lou supporter for the longest time. You remember when I was the only one in that hill at one point in time. But I think the successes that he's had over the past 2 seasons, sometimes I feel like his arrogance on defense borderlines on stupidity, to be completely honest with you. I've seen a lot of different formations this year, whether it be taking Jordan Battle out for passing downs for Nick Scott, and that burning you over and over again after you swore to the fan base that Nick Scott was the starter.
Battle.
I said, yeah.
You're good.
So as you said, Jordan Battle was the starter. You swap Nick Scott in for passing downs. I've seen Mike Hilton get played at safety this year. I've seen defensive coverages that had Jalen Davis playing outside today. I've seen some of the craziest things that I would never advise. Mike Hilton playing outside this year with no safety help over the top. I've seen a cornerback coming off of an ACL tear being left on a man-to-man island this year. I've seen a cornerback coming off of an ACL tear being put in the slot this year. I've seen Sam Hubbard lined up at middle linebacker. I've seen some of the craziest wonky things. You know what I saw today that was interesting? I saw Trey Hendrickson, who's your best pass rusher on the football team, get thrown into pass coverage while rushing 3. So yes, I have to wonder, does the arrogance borderline on stupidity? That is what I saw. This is a man that I set up here and I defended. I died on the hill. And I said, yeah, I think he's one of the best defensive play callers. Now I got to wonder how big or how important was Jesse Bates, who had a pick 6 today, by the way, and Von Bell were to this defense. Maybe they masked a lot, because with the absence of those, man, this defense looks like a shell of itself. The fact of the matter is, man, you thought that the defense at one point in time, and it could be a thing, right? Of saying, hey, the defense plays a lot. The defense plays a lot of snaps, but it's not that. That's not what it is. It's playing people at wrong spots. And you got to wonder, is it a communication thing? I've seen some of the craziest things this year already, guys. Man-to-man coverage, no safety help. We're going to blitz 2 safeties and have, Mike Hilton play outside corner. I've seen that this year. Mike Hilton is going to guard DK Metcalf on the outside. The only thing that's been consistent on the Bengals defensive line? What my man Andrew Woods is saying in the comment section. They can't guard tight ends. They can't cover tight ends. I promise you guys, if you want to know how to beat the Blue Anarumo vaunted defense, throw to your tight end. Your tight end might have 200 yards. But once again, guys, this isn't things that are just popping its head. That can date all the way back to even the Super Bowl year. Remember George Kittle had almost 100 and had 156 yards on the Bengals? Isn't it crazy that Pat Freiermuth has some great games against the Bengals? This is what happens. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's upsetting. I want to keep it going though. Brad Robbins played like shit. Can we all agree to that?
Yep.
Yeah?
Rough.
Played horrible. I saw Darren Simmons chewing into him on the sideline a couple of times. All right? It was a bad performance all around today. You have to be able to win the field position battle. Somebody said a tight end is still open down the sideline. Down the middle, I'm sorry. Hey, listen. I'm going to kick it over to Daniel so we can get to answering some of you guys' questions. Make sure you guys do us a huge favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live. Also, remember, every single week that the Bengals play a game, First Star Logistics will be doing a giveaway of some sort. Make sure you head on over to their X or Twitter, whatever you prefer to call it, because I think it closes tonight at midnight, and you want to definitely enter in for a chance to win. So, Daniel?
So the most important thing we have to discuss, let's get down to the real stuff. Matt Lanham and a couple other people are saying, would Joe call for a change? Will this front office change? Like some people were saying, oh, they are going to fire people this offseason. The fact of the matter, and we were talking with our guy, Kevin, First Star, and the truth with the Cincinnati Bengals is, hey, they love their guys, right? Whether it was AJ Green, they love their guys. Zach Taylor, this coaching staff, Duke Tobin, they love their guys. So you guys as fans, all of us as fans, we have to go into it with the mindset of, hey, what can we add? What should the Bengals add to this roster to make it better? Because if we're being honest, the head coach most likely isn't going to change. Defensive coordinator most likely isn't going to change. Whether we believe it should or not, it probably isn't going to. So when I look at the future of the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the things that sticks out is, first off, how many free agents the Bengals have. You got guys like T. Higgins, DJ Reader, Jonah Williams. the thing that sparks my mind immediately, and obviously we're about 3 months, 4 months away from the NFL draft, 5 months away from the draft, is you have to hit on your draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hit on your draft picks. Let me just read you guys some names really quickly. Joey Porter Jr., Dalton Kincaid, Jahmyr Gibbs, Zay Flowers, DeJuan Jones, Brian Branch, Will Anderson, Tank Dell, Sam Laporta. Those are some names from this year. And then even last year, man, George Karlaftis, Sauce Gardner, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Jordan Davis, Kyle Hamilton. These are all guys that were drafted in the first 2 rounds that have made an immediate impact on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Immediate impact. And if we're talking about Super Bowls for the Cincinnati Bengals, those first 2 draft picks, especially if this season continues to keep going the way it's going right now, those first 2 to 3 draft picks, you have to hit on those. And they've got to be guys that you can see them contributing it within the first 2 seasons. And we can't rely on a 5th rounder. We can't rely on a 6th rounder. So Andre Yoshivas has been good. He's a potential starter in the future, but I'm talking about those first 2 draft picks. I'm talking to Duke Tobin. Listen, whatever it takes in the draft scouting department, whatever it takes, hit on your first 2 to 3 picks, please. Because I promise you guys, there's guys coming out.
Okay.
So yeah.
Not just that. Let's talk about some philosophy.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to let you guys know something. The Bengals are the kings of loving a guy, right? And then saying, we're going to wait and we're going to bank on that guy being available for us. If we're talking about the offense changing its ways, a couple things. Like obviously they're more active in free agency. Great. Bravo. Obviously they're always trying to retain their guys. Great. Bravo. Those are good things, right? But in the draft process, if there's a player that you want, how about you go be aggressive? You want to know why teams like Baltimore stay competitive? Why teams like Pittsburgh don't have losing seasons? If there's a player that you want, make deals, right? Make deals, acquire that talent, acquire that talent.
Yep.
And then, draft that guy and you say, you know what, that we finally got the guy that we want. Don't have a Frank Ragnow situation where you say, you know what, oh, we didn't get Frank Ragnow, but we got Billy Price. Don't tell me that after the draft that this is a player that you really liked, like you wanted to draft Greg Little. Remember that? Then you wanted to draft Cody Ford. And then you attempted to place a phone call and a team, didn't want to trade with you guys because you're asking what you were offering was trash. These are the things that you need to do in order to stay competitive, right? So if there's a guy that you want in the draft, you move up to get him. Also, Bengals, free agency does not end after the first 2 weeks. People are still acquiring players after free agency. People are acquiring players for preseason, for training camp. You don't have, if a player goes down, right? If a player goes down during the season, you can add an outside free agent. Oh, by the way, if a player goes down or you have a hole at a certain position, you can call other teams during the season and make a trade. Like these are the elementary school things that this front office needs to be doing to stay competitive. We're simply just answering the question about if the front office what the front office needs to do in order to make some changes. These are some of the things that they could do. This is what the new age front offices, offenses have done to stay competitive. Also in the offseason, again, you need to address the offensive problem. And it can't just be, oh, well, we went out and we spent money. It's going to work. That's just my thought process. Daniel?
Yeah. The more I'm thinking about it, and I don't want to be, beat a dead horse, but man, like I even look at last year, we can still say, like, I truly believe the Bengals have to do a better job drafting. I truly believe they have to do a better job in free agency, especially like look at the quarterback position. It's still like, it pains me to know that last year where they were in the dance, even with all those flaws. So for me, it's like, it's this coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
You were in the dance 2 years ago in the main dance, the Super Bowl, with that offensive line. The following year, you were in the dance, the AFC Championship, with the flaws that we're talking about. So this team, we can talk about, yes, they need to hit on the draft picks. They should add more talent free agency. It's still, the more my mind's thinking about it, comes back to this offense coaching staff.
Yeah. Also, if you guys do YouTube, give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate it.
Vic A and Randy Hollingsworth were talking about, how do you guys feel about Chase Brown getting 0 snaps? Where is Chase Brown?
I think Chase Brown is like the 4th running back on the depth chart. I think I'm not even sure if he's ahead of Chris Evans. I think it's Joe Mixon, Travion Williams, Chris Evans, then Chase Brown. But I think they're very interchangeable.
And that's even, like, it pains me to know the Pittsburgh Steelers have a guy in Jalen Warren that they can bring in to spell Najee Harris. But at the same time, respectfully, if Joe Mixon's getting 8 carries, what's a Chase Brown supposed to do?
This feels like Bill Lazor's offense all over again, man. And it's crazy. Bill Lazor and Zach Taylor were all together, in Miami. And it just feels like they're allergic to running the football. They just don't want to run the football. And running the football is a crucial part of the NFL. You have to be able to run the football. You have to be able to do it at a respectable pace, at a respectable level. Because here's the thing: you can change offensive line coaches, but here's the thing, guys. They weren't able to run the football with Jim Turner, right? They weren't able to run the football with Jim Turner. So what makes you think firing Frank Pollock is going to automatically make them be able to run the football? No, it's a Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan philosophical issue.
Yeah, and I even look at it, like I said, it just sucks because every other team is doing it. Every other team has these guys. So like today, not seeing Chase Brown, that was the least of my worries, to be honest. Griff 142, our guy, we appreciate you tuning in as always.
Griff, brother.
He said, how would you guys change the defensive philosophy? As we have seen, a bend don't break defense only works with a consistent and competent offense. Yes, but he wants to give Burrow a Baltimore type defense. First off, I think this is the same thing. I think a lot of it goes down to personnel as well, knowing your personnel. But at the same time, pass rush is number one. However you slice it, pass rush is number one. That's one of my biggest issues, because you can allow the Mike Hilton, George Pickens one-on-one if you're getting pass rush. But if you're rushing 3 guys, it doesn't work. So pass rush would be my biggest focal point in this offseason. Now, number one, obviously adding more juice to edge rushers, but 2, just the way you're scheming it up, respectfully, it's okay to drop, to rush 3 at times, but not with this pass rush, not with Trey Hendrickson off the field. You look at all the other teams, Brian Flores, the Minnesota Vikings, they blitz on, 50% of the snaps. And if they're not blitzing, they're doing the exact opposite. They're dropping everybody. So I like when Lou shows different looks. I like when Lou loads up the line of scrimmage. But when I look at how this defense has to change, you can't have Jermaine Pratt one-on-one with the tight end. You can't allow, the defense or the offense just to keep picking away, 3-yard reception, Pat Freiermuth. You have to force them to throw the ball deep. You have to force them. That's one thing I can point to, and all you guys can, is we haven't seen Dax Hill have to make a lot of plays in the passing game. And that should show you the type of plays that they're allowing. They're allowing the tight end down the middle. They're allowing these quick passes, but they're not allowing, they're not funneling the opposing offense like a Kenny Pickett. I would want them to say, hey, let George Pickens run a post and let him go one-on-one with Dax Hill. Let them throw it deep. But that's what you guys saw today. They didn't have to. And that's a huge issue that I've seen is, hey, why is Dax Hill not having to make these plays in the pass game? It's because of the way this defense is formulated. And it's okay when it works. It's okay when you're having turnovers. But when it's not, you guys see the tight ends, 8 targets, 10 targets. If a tight end is getting 8 targets, 10 targets, it means that the quarterback is taking what's being given to him, and Lou Anarumo's defense and the Bengals defense right now are giving up too much. So that's what I would say.
Yep, I agree with you.
Akil the Great said, let's say the Bengals continue down this road. What would you guys do in the offseason? Fire Zach Taylor for who? So this is us saying, Malik, not what they're going to do, but what they should do. What would you do if you were in the Bengals front office?
What would I do if I was in the Bengals front office? I would force Zach Taylor's hand, and I'd make him make changes on the offensive side of the football. I don't care who you think you know or what you think you know, because clearly it's not working, right? And that's something that needs to happen ASAP. Guys, I hate to be a jerk, right? I don't like coming on here and being a jerk. but I do want to explain something to you guys really, really quickly. Zach Taylor is only in the NFL as a coach because he is married to Mike Sherman's daughter. He was not deserving of being in the NFL, also being a head coach in the NFL. Let's just call it what it is. Now, I will say he's been very good at being a leader of men, if you will, and corralling them. But it's all about who you know. You think about that Miami Dolphins 2012 coaching staff. Before he was in the NFL, Zach Taylor was a graduate assistant at Texas A&M. Right? That's what he was. And Tom Brooks, you can say it's the stupidest thing that I ever said, but let's talk about it. He came into the league because Mike Sherman was the offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins in 2012. That was the Joe Philbin-led staff in 2012. So you can say I'm stupid, but I'm simply stating a fact. He went from graduate assistant to the Miami Dolphins, which he was under his father-in-law, who was the offensive coordinator. There he met defensive backs coach who? Lou Anarumo. You know who else was on that staff, guys? Ben Johnson. You know who else was on that staff? Jim Turner. Yeah. Those are some of the guys that were on that staff. Remember Kevin Coyle, the Bengals' old defensive backs coach? So Dan Campbell, who's the head coach of the Detroit Lions, was on that coaching staff too. So while you say that what I'm saying is stupid, the point that I'm trying to make is, where did he earn his chops to be called a efficient play caller? Where? Most of these guys have to work years and years and years. I'm not saying Zach Taylor's a bad head coach. I'm saying Zach Taylor's a bad play caller. Tom Brooks, you're saying he accidentally fell into the Super Bowl. Yeah, with Joe Burrow, who was considered the consensus best college quarterback in the last, decade? Without Joe Burrow, he's 428-1. What are you arguing? You sound biased. We talk facts. If you want to be emotional, leave. The fact of the matter is, as an offensive play caller, it continues to rear its ugly head. The point of me bringing up the fact that he was a graduate assistant and he went from a graduate assistant to working under his father-in-law, Mike Sherman, the point of me bringing that up is he never had to be a play caller. And the one time he was a play caller, he got fired. He aligned himself with Sean McVay and the Rams as a wide receivers coach and a quarterbacks coach, and he became a head coach. The Bengals offense has been abysmal up until they brought in Joe Burrow. Where is what I'm saying stupid, Tom Brooks? Where is what I'm saying not factual, Tom Brooks? You can name about 15 to 17 to 20 offenses in the NFL that are better than the Bengals, Tom Brooks. It's people like you who are biased, who can't look past the simple fact that an elite quarterback, this is what an elite quarterback does. An elite quarterback masks the flaws and the deficiencies of an inept play caller. That's what they do. It's what they've always done. Adam Gase looked great when he had Peyton Manning. He looked great. You say my take is lazy. I say your take is lazy. Your take is lazy. And I'm willing to debate you any point, anytime. You're welcome on this damn show. But you're not going to tell me, a guy who simply watches film day after day, that this Bengals offense is sufficient. It's horrible. You're the same guy that probably blames the players for bad play calling. It's horrible. And yeah, I'm frustrated because this Bengals football team deserves better. This offense deserves better. 8 runs with the guy that has no history in the National Football League and Jake Browning is abysmal. How big of an ass do you have to be to not see that? It's horrible. It's setting the guy up for failure. And I'm sorry. I'm sitting in the First Star Logistics suite looking over to my right at that young man's girlfriend as he's getting pulverized and seeing his family's reaction as he's getting pulverized because this coaching staff decides we're not going to do anything to protect that kid. The same reason why Joe Burrow has been hurt and the same reason why that quarterback has been out of the lineup for two years. He has not been able to complete. 2 years. So yeah, that's why Bengals fans are frustrated. So you can get the hell out of here with that giving a Zach Taylor and giving Brian Callahan a pass because you're a biased homer. I'm not. I'm going to sit up on this show and I'm going to tell it like it is. The play calling is atrocious. Zach Taylor's play calling is atrocious. Brian Callahan's play calling is atrocious. And anybody that sees it any other way doesn't know football. That's my thoughts. Stop giving these guys a pass. If it was anywhere else other than Cincinnati, his ass would be fired. His ass would be fired. Fox led the Broncos to a Super Bowl and got fired because he wasn't the man for the job. Stop giving these guys a pass. Horrible. It's horrible. It's the reason why people like Pat McAfee have shows and they look at Cincinnati as a laughingstock. You want to sit up there and give people passes. This offense has T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon. And you can't field a sufficient offense, especially against the Pittsburgh Steelers? You're getting outplayed by Kenny Pickett? The new play caller of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Sullivan, looked better than Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan. No offensive identity. No, we are not going to give them a pass. I'm not going to give them a pass. And the reason why I'm speaking like this, it's called passion. Mic drop, Daniel.
Shit, might as well end the show now. There's not much else that needs to be said, man. Wow. I mean, you're right, man. Honestly, I don't have a follow-up for that. Everything you just said. Bengals fans understand that and my biggest takeaway, let me dissect with what you just said for the fans as well. If this was anywhere else, he would be fired. That's my biggest takeaway. And for Bengals fans, take yourself out of the shoes of being Bengals fans. Put yourself in other shoes. Look at these other coaches that have gotten fired after 1 year. Look at these other coaches that have gotten fired after 2 years, after 3 years. Not saying Zach Taylor should be fired, but the difference is the Cincinnati Bengals organization is different than these other organizations. They don't make trades like these other organizations. They have tried to get out of their own way, but they are stuck in their own ways. So, man, you killed that, man. Let me go. I hate to go to our guy Tom Brooks again, but he had another question. He said, I'm amazed that at the start of the season, the experts were calling this one of the deepest teams. Now the front office is trash. I just think that's wrong at the same thing because I still look at this Bengals team as they are deep in certain areas. They are, but the issue isn't them being deep. It's where they're deep. It's their biggest flaws. You look at the quarterback position. Yeah, they're deep there, but they didn't go out there and acquire a good backup or a great backup quarterback. It's just it's a Jake Browning. They came out of, Joe Burrow with his calf injury and said, hey, Jake Browning's our guy. Trevor Siemian's AJ McCarron's our guy. And when you look at the rest of the team, I'm fine with Andre Yoshivas taking over for T. Higgins. I'm not concerned about that. That's the NFL, right? The offensive line, the same thing. I'm fine with the way the offensive line is. You guys should be too. But it should show you that after 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks of the NFL season, it comes down to the coaching staff. You look at these other teams, the 49ers did it without Trent Williams. The 49ers did it without Christian McCaffrey. The 49ers did it without Brandon Ayuk. These other teams can still have success. The Philadelphia Eagles do it with injuries on the offensive line. It's because they have a good scheme. So, yeah, Malik, you have any thoughts on that front office? Honestly, we should just end it now. I mean, that your rant.
I'd rather get to more questions if we have any more.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be like, I've been holding that in, and you guys know I've been the biggest, trying to find the little positivity, trying to find positivity, but like, we want to know why the national media looks at people like, looks at us the way we do, man. And that's why I came to Cincinnati, man. Untapped sports market, and we get treated like shit in the media from other people, but it's also because we refuse to get out of our own way. And that's the frustrating part. Because guess what? When it takes until Pat McAfee jumps on a show and talks about how the Bengals don't have a practice bubble and you start to feel that outside pressure for you to actually start doing things and trying to change your identity. It takes until people start lighting fire and say, you know what, Joe Burrow should not, want to play in Cincinnati, for them to be like, oh, we'll change our ways. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's like, you can make changes. It's like, and when you finally make changes, it's like, all right, great, adapt. But then it takes you another 10 years to make more changes. That's why Marvin Lewis was so influential towards this coaching staff. Marvin Lewis, he tried to make so many changes toward the organization. He might not have been the best head coach, but he was definitely a culture setter. He is 100% would be the culture change, was the culture change that this Bengals team needed. It's just frustrating because it's stupid. You can't get out of your own way.
Yeah, and I think going back to, I don't know if it was a question, but it was somebody was talking about, somebody has to ask, the Bengals coaching staff hard hitting questions. That's one of my biggest issues.
Yeah.
Is you see these other teams, man, in like the Brandon Staley's of the world, they're getting asked these hard questions, and respectfully, a lot of coaches, even like Mike Tomlin went out there and said, "Hey, shit, something's got to change."
It's also like, if you guys want me to dig really deep into the organization, I have no problem with doing it. Hear me out. There's a reason why a lot of people didn't want to come coaching Cincinnati. Cincinnati is one of the only few organizations in which the coaches have to end up coaching a season, right? They coach a season, and then they have to then jump right into scouting, because the scouting department is so small. So it's like, you have to be out on the road. You have to go to the senior. You have to go do all these things because they refuse to spend and expand on a scouting department. And even when they do, it's people's coaches' sons working for the scouting department, being cheap in that way in that regard. It's the reason why they're not able to find, some of these bigger these great prospects at smaller schools and stuff like that. It's just a lot of backwards as hell thinking, and like it makes absolutely literally no sense. It's completely asinine. And that's the reason why I genuinely think they struggle with drafting, unless they have an obvious pick where it's a player staring you right in the face, and it's like, draft me, draft me, draft me. They're gonna struggle with it. They're gonna struggle with it. It's their, like, I don't know what they judge players on, or what their scouting metric is, but sometimes not as hard as reinventing the wheel. Tevin Jenkins was staring at you in the face, and you said, no, we're going to draft Jackson Carman. Why? Because Mike Brown listens to Paul Alexander, a guy that was the Bengals offensive line coach for 20 years. Why? Like it's like, I don't know, man. It's just like, ugh.
So Joe Wood, and this is exactly the quote I was trying to bring up. I appreciate you putting this quote in. Zach Taylor said about not running the ball today. He said, that's life against Pittsburgh.
What?
That's exactly, because he was asked like, oh, well, tough time running the ball. He literally said, well, that's life against Pittsburgh.
No, it's not life against Pittsburgh. You made that life against Pittsburgh. You made your thoughts that reality. I tell you, sometimes when he's calling plays in the game, it feels like he gets caught up in the game. It seems like he gets caught up in it, and he lets his emotion take over. That's what happens.
And it's also the thing where
Creed Humphrey, you could have got Creed Humphrey. You drafted Jackson Carman. Your second round pick is sitting on the bench, standing next to Max Sharping, talking about how they're going to eat tacos after the game. Probably has no idea what's going on for the gameplay. Has no role on the football team outside of being a backup offensive line. That is what your second round pick, who you spent draft capital on, is doing. Because you, once again, bad pick. Like, for me, it's like, I don't know. It's That's the guy you drafted over Creed Humphrey, over Tevin Jenkins, because he's a product of Cincinnati and Paul Alexander worked with him. Great, cool.
Yeah, and that's when I'm looking at just how the Bengals draft as well. That's why obviously we want the Bengals to win.
Of course.
But at the same time, when you're projecting for the future, we said this on State of the Jungle. We appreciate you guys if you guys tune into that every Wednesday. If you have a borderline top 10 pick, it's a lot easier to hit on that for the Bengals coaching staff than if you have a 20, 21, or 22 pick. And like I said, I'm looking at some of these names that have gotten drafted too, even in the second round. There's some names, man, that they're just missed. Like Creed Humphrey was a huge one. And then in the third round, you went out, you got Joseph Asai, and there's even guys like that, like Joseph Asai. Like I understand he had a lot of hype, but they're not putting out the production.
Tom Brooks. I'm sorry to make the show about you. You just commented, brother. And number one, I appreciate you for supporting, man, because without you guys commenting, we can't do what we do. But you said I am a homer. I've been a fan for 50 years. I'm not a bandwagon guy who jumped on in the 2020s. Neither am I, Tom. Tom, I'm gonna show you how much of a non-homer I am. I grew up in a town called Montclair, New Jersey, where our hometown team was the New York Football Giants. In that span, the Giants won 2 Super Bowls. It would have been easy for me to say, hey, you know what? I am a Giants fan. Or like my dad, I am a Dolphins fan. Or like my mom, I am a Titans fan. But I picked the Bengals because when I was a kid, I liked tigers growing up. I liked colors. I stood on that hill. I died on that hill. I said, I'm a Bengals fan. I got ridiculed. I got bullied at points in time when we would lose first round after first round after first round after first round. Now, granted, I didn't live through the 90s. Like I know so many people like to throw up, oh, you didn't go after anything, because I was born in 95. So I didn't live through the lost decade. No, but I did live through lost seasons. I do remember the Terrell Owens being in Cincinnati. I do remember when Chad Johnson used to get locked up by Darrelle Revis. I do remember losing to the Jets in the first round. I do remember losing to the Texans and the Chargers after having so much hope. I do remember the loss that hurt me the most when I was a kid growing up, and that was seeing the Cincinnati Bengals lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card round with Adrian McCarron starting a quarterback. I do remember that. So I know that people like to gatekeep fandom, and they like to say, hey, well, you know, my job, I got into this business. And I remember when I wrote my first stories and I sent it to Jay Morrison, he gave me great feedback. I remember I wanted to cover the Bengals. And then I came here. I came to Cincinnati my first ever time covering a camp with only $200 to my name when I was working part-time as an associate for Lid's Locker Room. And I fell in love with the city. I remember going to Eli's barbecue and being invited to a bunch of tailgates. And I said, you know what? I love Cincinnati. I love Cincinnati. And I told my buddy, Zach Busher, I said, one day I'm going to move to Cincinnati. And I said, I remember sending Emily Parker an email along with PJ. And I said, hey, I can't wait for the day that I come to Cincinnati to help change the narrative, because the national narrative, long before Pat McAfee even had a damn podcast, back when he was a player, I said, I can't wait to come to Cincinnati to help change the narrative and be a part of the change from the media perspective, because I don't think Cincinnati's ever had anybody in the media quite like me. And boom, here we are a couple of years later. A company by the name of First Star Logistics took a chance on me. And then I fought tooth and nail. Obviously, you guys knew me. I got a bursted onto the scene by breaking Bengals news. I fought tooth and nail. I didn't want to do a Bengals show, but then I started doing a Bengals show, and I fell in love with coming on this show week in and week out. I moved to Cincinnati and have made this place home. Moved here with my best friend. And I've endured every single thing. So no, this isn't a rodeo that has started for me in 2020. I've been here long before Burrow was a quarterback, long before Dalton was the quarterback. I say all that to say, you can be a fan. Hell, you could be a bandwagon, but you also have to be able to look at the Bengals and talk about their flaws. It's the only way you get better. This fan base holds more power than you think. It's only then that's when this organization will make changes. But you can admit their flaws. You can talk about what the things that they need to do in order to get better. That's all I'm going to say. And Tom, I hear what you're saying. You say, Malik, I like you and support you. I just agree on the coaching being all the problem. No, I don't think that the coaching staff is all the problem, but I do think after year 5 and you still have no offensive identity and only 2 years with having Joe Burrow in the lineup, mask a lot of those flaws. I think that is an issue. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about, especially when you were a failed offensive coordinator at UC. I think that needs to be talked about. You failed at every time that you've gotten a job to call plays offensively. You failed. The couple times you didn't fail is when you had an elite quarterback who was drafted with the first overall pick, who was expected to do great things in the NFL. That is when you were able to field a sufficient offense. But even points in time, the offense wasn't sufficient. That's all I'm saying. I'm hard on Zach Taylor. I am hard on Lou Anarumo. I am hard on this coaching staff because when you see the talent that they have, listen, one can even say Zach has had more talent on the offensive side than Lou's had on the defensive side.
Yes.
We've seen what Lou can do when he has, above average play. But I'm literally looking at Zach, and you have elite talent on the offensive side of the football. That is where my issues come in. That's all I'm saying. Changes need to be made. I think Zach Taylor is a fine head coach. I don't think he's a good play caller. I think two of those things can be the same. I think we can say Zach Taylor is a good head coach, but not a good play caller. I think two of those things can be the same. I do. Damn.
Yeah, I think when you also, once again, Bengals fans, it's important for you guys to go get perspective. Look at opposing teams. I'll point at opposing teams like the Washington Commanders. I've watched a lot of Commanders football. Malik, you have as well. Their team, and you look at Sam Howell leading league in passing yards right now. They're a team that when you look at what is their biggest flaw, a lot of you point to, and a lot of us can point to, well, Sam Howell's turning the ball over. What is not their flaw? They're not their flaw is their play calling, their designs, what they're doing to set their quarterback up for success. And when you look at all these other opposing teams, what they are doing with their guys, right? What they're doing with the Gardner Minshews of the world, right? They're making life easier on their quarterback. Make life easier on your quarterback. And that's going to be the story. I saw somebody said, the season's not over. The Bengals, all it needs is one win to turn the season around. Yeah, season isn't completely over. You can string together a couple wins, but the fact of the matter is the way the AFC is right now, even making the playoffs is a rough shot with the way the Bengals are looking. So we're going to discuss everything, right? That's what you were saying, Malik, right? And that's what a lot of people were asking about, is saying like, oh, well, are people, concerned to go at the Bengals in the Bengals media? It's not that, right? Some people maybe, but we're not. We're going to talk how it is, and we're going to be honest with you guys, and that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're discussing the flaws that need to be changed because of the expectations we have.
I think Victoria Mitchell, and Victoria, welcome to Who Day. Welcome, and I appreciate you. I'm not sure if I've seen you comment on the show before, but I appreciate you so much. She says, well, I am a new fan, and we love new fans. Let me just say that right now. Don't let anybody tell you if you're a new fan of the Bengals, we do want you. That's how we grow, and that's how we multiply. They say, well, I'm a new fan, and I've seen and agree with Malik's assessment of the issues. As a new fan, I appreciate hearing Zach Taylor's background because it explains a lot. 100%. I don't get on here to ridicule Zach Taylor's background. I just hope I think people thought, I don't know if people knew the extensive, background of Zach Taylor when he took the job. I think people look at him and they say, he was with Sean McVay, because that's where the buck stops. They don't talk about he was on Joe Philbin's staff. The staff got gutted and fired because they all sucked. They don't talk about that portion. They don't talk about his days at UC. That all gets swept under the rug. And I understand he's back in the city in which he was the offensive coordinator for the college, and it makes things a little muddy and hairy. But that was the only other time we got to judge him as a play caller. UC had one of the worst offenses under him. And I'm just saying, that has reared its ugly head even here in Cincinnati. And it's okay. We want him. We want him here in Cincinnati. He helped lead us to a Super Bowl. All we're saying is, hey, maybe we need a different play caller. That's okay. Marvin Lewis was one of the best defensive coordinators in the National Football League. He got to Cincinnati. He had Leslie Frazier. He had Mike Zimmer. He had Paul Gunther. He had other people calling the defenses. It wasn't until Terrell Austin came in, and Terrell Austin sucked. Marvin Lewis said, you know what? I'm going to take over and be the guy to call defensive plays. That is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. It's sometimes the head coach needs to hand over the play calling duties. I understand Zach wants to be the play caller as well, but we can't even justifiably judge Brian Callahan because Zach calls the plays. So it makes things tough. And I get that they want it set up that way for certain reasons, but it's very similar into the fashion of the Brown family of, hey, we don't want to call Duke Tobin general manager because we'd rather have it set up that way. So we call him director of player personnel because you just rather have that block between, he's basically the liaison, right? So it's like it's trickled down almost to Zach's staff in some way. It's frustrating to talk about, but that it definitely is. Tom Brooks said, who else was on Philbin's staff? Lou Anarumo was on Philbin's staff. Ben Johnson was on Philbin's staff. Dan Campbell was on Philbin's staff. People don't know is Dan Campbell and Zach Taylor, Lou Anarumo are all very close. They're all very close. If Dan Campbell didn't work out for some reason, I wouldn't, which I'm not saying he will, but I wouldn't be surprised if he found his way in Cincinnati. He was a special teams coordinator and stuff like that. So like they're all intertwined and all connected. Mike Sherman, Zach Taylor's father-in-law, was the offensive coordinator. Joe Philbin, he really shouldn't have took the job and for personal reasons. And, he was on that staff. It was just a lot going on with that staff. And it's funny how much of crossover with that staff is with Cincinnati staff. Jim Turner, the Bengals offensive line coach, former offensive line coach, was on that staff. So that was around the time when there was that bullying scandal with Richie Incognito and I forgot the other guy's name. That's who was with that staff. If you guys remember that a couple years ago in the NFL was a big bullying scandal with the Dolphins. That Zach Taylor was a part of that staff.
Yeah. Chicken Genius 420 said, I don't need perspective. I watch every game. I see that Zach is a problem. And I've been saying that for years. We're not saying that you are specifically the one that needs perspective. We're just talking to everybody. We're trying to explain to you guys about the past and why the past is present with Zach Taylor. And when we're looking at, the future of the Cincinnati Bengals. Iron Man XRP said, again, in the history of football, where have you seen a quarterback's coach turn head coach? I think Nathaniel Hackett used to be a quarterback coach. I
also think Sean Payton
might have been.
I have to check. Let me just double check that because I like to have my facts correct.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Sean Payton was. Let me just double check that really quickly. Sean Payton was. Yeah, he was the Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks coach, quarterbacks coach for the Giants. No, he was the offensive coordinator for the Giants from 2000 to 2002, assistant head coach and quarterbacks coach for the Cowboys, and then took over as the head coach. He had 2 years of offensive coordinator experience with the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Was he trying to make the point about Brian Callahan? Or?
No, he's talking about Zach Taylor.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he was talking about Zach Taylor.
Quarterbacks coach. Yep. Akila the Great said, did the Bengals have the gag on the media personnel? It seems they're afraid to ask or to get their media access revoked. Listen, all I'm going to say about that, and this is a point that you brought up, Malik, the fan base and the masses speak numbers. I promise you guys. And the Bengals, they may be a lot slower than every other organization to listen to the fan base, but I promise you guys, the fan base, and this goes in life in general, whatever the fan base wants, the fan base will typically get, especially if there's a big enough uproar. That's because at the end of the day, the fan base is what does it. The fan base is what goes to the games. Even today, I was surprised personally seeing the way the fans were flowing into the stadium at first. I was like, damn, it's going to be rough. They're not going to be, it's not going to be sold out. By the time kickoff was, it was loud as hell. So I was very, very impressed. But like,
and actually, correction, Sean Payton got his play calling duties revoked with the Giants after poor showings. The head coach took over after that. Then he joined Bill Parcells with the Dallas Cowboys and as an assistant and all that kind of stuff like that. So yeah, it happens. I think you can see that, but it also, like, at least you have those shots. Listen, for me, I don't mind like Zach Taylor taking off of play calling duties. Let's say if they were in a pinch or something like that. But I think that the duty of the head coach is it's almost like a promotion, right? So you should look at it as a promotion. You should let someone else get those chops to be able to elevate their game and become an offensive coordinator or whatever the case may be. I think that's how you continue to evolve as an offense.
And when you also look at it, where the tea leaves, what's showing up, every time a player talks about Zach Taylor, Logan Wilson, I've seen Joe Burrow, many players talk about Zach Taylor. They're saying Zach's an amazing guy. I appreciate Zach for standing up for me. I appreciate Zach. He's the leader of us, right? He's the leader. He stands up for us. He's a great man. He's not a lot of people are talking about, and this isn't a fault towards Zach, but not a lot of the praise about Zach Taylor is about his play calling, right? And for me personally, what I love listening to the players because the players will always speak, right? Jamar Chase earlier this year, he spoke, right? He was upset, right? Give me the ball. I want the ball. Or, 7, I'm always open. When a player speaks, it holds value because they're actually the ones who are in there, right? So if the players are speaking great things about Zach, as a leader of men, as a locker room guy, as somebody sticking up for them. Even today in the press conference, he stood up for Joe Mixon. Rightfully so. He said this was not about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's been a great back. Joe Mixon's a great back for us. He's standing up for his guys, but that does not mean he's an amazing play caller. Like you said, two things can be true at the same time. C. Griff said we need fresh ideas with the O-line coach position. And let me just talk one last thing real quick. People are saying the offensive line, we need to add new offensive linemen. I will point to the Houston Texans as a thing of the offensive line is not always about talent. Pass blocking is not always about talent. You look at today, what happened? TJ Watt came around the edge. That was not about talent. That was about miscommunication. You had a tight end out there to block TJ Watt, and then you had Jonah Williams who didn't know his assignment, turned inside. TJ Watt went right past him. I promise you guys, offensive line is not always about coaching or not always about personnel. A lot of it is about coaching. It's about implementing who's going to chip where. It's the little things. We're watching. You have a backup quarterback in, and you don't have a running back to help pass protect. Those are the little details about an offense, and that goes to show that's not a personnel thing. That is a coaching thing. Having a running back in the backfield is not Jonah Williams' call. That is not Jake Browning's call. I promise you guys, that is the play call. So stuff like that where you'll see a CJ Stroud. Why is CJ Stroud blowing up this year? Is it all because of his talent? It's not all because of his talent. It's because of the coaching staff. It's because of the scheme. So the personnel has a lot to do with it, but in the NFL, scheme is so much about everything. He said Volson is about talent. Of course, there's issues. Talent will rear its ugly head, but most of the issues that I've seen, especially recently, has not been fully about talent. So, man,
somebody asked me about Tom Coughlin. Yeah, Tom Coughlin, he's a weird one. He was like a college. He was Syracuse's offensive coordinator. He was I think he was the head coach of Boston College, and then he, obviously he was like wide receivers coach a little bit before that in the league, but then he made the jump. He currently already had his chops in the league, and then he went to college, and then he made the jump to the Jacksonville Jaguars head coach, and then Giants after that. So I think that's why. But
you want to get some more?
If you guys do us very, very, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate it. We're live, as you guys know. We do the State of the Jungle every single Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Somebody asked the question, so I guess this means you guys aren't going to Jacksonville. We actually are going to Jacksonville. I head out Friday. Daniel heads out Thursday. We will be in Jacksonville for Jake Browning's second start against Trevor Lawrence on Monday Night Football. We will be there. We will be there come hell or high water, and I'll be there ready to also talk about the pros and the cons again. So. I'll still be live though.
Yeah, you want to get some more?
Let's get two more, and then let's head out of here because I want to let people enjoy their Sunday or fume about their Sunday.
Randy Hollingsworth said, "Do you guys think that they'll go with AJ McCarron if this continues?"
Of what continues? I think if Jake Browning continues to perform the way he did today, it'd be enough for him to continue to stay starting. I think that they can. I think that they still have. They have all the faith in them. But no, I think if Jake Browning performs well enough to not get benched, he will still be the starting quarterback. He would have to have an abysmal performance. I'm talking about like offense is stagnant, those like 2-3 interceptions. There was a point earlier today after like I want to say like third or fourth drive where Jake Browning couldn't get going. Jake coach walked up to AJ McCarron and said something to him, and then AJ took his jacket off and started throwing. So I was like, okay, maybe we might see AJ McCarron. But then literally the next drive, they go out and score with Drew Sample, and then I was like, okay, he put his jacket back on, and it was over. So yeah.
Yeah, somebody brought up Brandon Staley. Oh, how would you like? I think it was our guy Tom Brooks. He said, "How would you like to have Brandon Staley as your head coach?" For me, if anything, this shows the same, not same exact issues, but what's the issue with Brandon Staley? Right? It's he's too focused on his defense, and first off, his defense isn't even good. Right? So it's the same thing to where, hey, if it's not working, you've got to fix it, and especially with the Chargers, respectfully. The Chargers haven't been to a Super Bowl. The Chargers haven't won a playoff game with Brandon Staley. So, is there parallels? Yes, but at the same time, you've got to understand that same exact thing. That if they're having issues, the Chargers organization has to figure it out, and they should probably part ways. Question from Zachary Hayes from a little while ago. He said, "Do you believe that Lou Anarumo is overrated at this point?"
Um, nah, I don't think he's overrated. I think he's fine. He's a fine defensive coordinator. I think that there's a real thing about believing your own hype, though, and I think that getting back in the lab and just focusing, maybe less Pat McAfee interviews and more focusing on being the defensive coordinator of the football team could help.
Yeah. One last question. Chuck 2624 said,
Let me just say this,
Yeah.
because that's not a like. I do think because everybody in Cincinnati, at least everybody in the building, know he was really disappointed after he didn't get the Cardinals head coach job. To me, like, I don't know, like, you focus on the wrong things at that point. Like, you need to be focused on making sure this team, you know, operates fully, because that's what got you into that spot. It was under the radar, underdog, nobody believed in you. And then it's like you start getting all these interviews and stuff like that. And you interview for the Dolphins job, the Giants job, the Cardinals job. And then, everybody's like, oh, Lou should be a head coach. Lou, you start hearing the national media, you start hearing Garofolo and all those people say Lou should be a head coach. And then, when it doesn't happen, you're frustrated, you're upset. It's all the things. And it can cost you, it can make you look ahead, and cause you to not focus in on what got you to this spot. And I can't help but feel like that's sort of what happened a little bit with this defense. Believing your own hype is a real thing.
And the part that sucks about it too is you're doing all these interviews after the fact that you went to the Super Bowl, like after the fact. And if you're doing this before and you were in that moment, but now you're in a losing season.
Yeah, and like, listen, it's everybody, and I don't care what profession you're in, you always want to move up. You always want to become the best at what you can do. But I think if you focus a little bit too much, like it got out that he was upset and he was hurt that the Cardinals passed him up for the job. He really believed that he was going to get the job, and it's like, yeah, everybody in Cincinnati knew, everybody in the building knew he was disappointed. That's never a thing that should have been known. Most people would have taken that on the chin and been like, all right, let's move forward. But like, you got to just focus in on what you can control. What you can focus in on and control is the fact that you're the defense coordinator of the Bengals. It shouldn't be a reset spot of like, oh, because it shows that you were already thinking about leaving at that point in time. You got to just focus in on what you can control. Somebody said he wanted to show people wrong instead of helping this team succeed. Yeah, I can't help but feel like got in his own way a little bit there. And it's fine. Nobody's perfect. We're all human, right? But I do think that there was a little bit of a looking ahead towards other opportunities for a lot of people on the staff.
One last one, Misfit K85 said, do you guys think the staff will get blown up other than staff or Zach? If I were to make a prediction, I think the staff stays exactly the same. That's my prediction.
I think it depends on how the offense looks down the stretch. I think I saw somebody say, what is Mike Zimmer doing since Lou's leaving? I don't think Lou's leaving. I think Lou gave up 400 yards to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's not getting a head coaching job. I can assure you he is not getting a head coaching job. He was struggling to get a head coaching job when the defense was playing great and having opportune turnovers. I don't see that. But in terms of what you said about, do you see anything changing? I think if this offense struggles and continues to struggle, I do see a world in which, because some change has to be made. The Brown family, some change has to be made. Zach Taylor's not getting fired. I don't think Zach Taylor's not getting fired. But I do think changes would have to be made on the offensive side of the football, whether that could be a change of Zach Taylor no longer the play caller. Somebody's head is going to have to roll if they go winless, which they can go winless in this stretch here.
Yeah. That's when you look at this stretch that they have too, man, these are winnable games. These are winnable games, and if you put out a product that is losing, and if you put out a product that is losing the rest of the season, you're going to have to change it. Just to give you guys the names, you got the Colts with Gardner Minshew. You have the Browns, who looked abysmal today with the backup quarterback against the Denver Broncos. And you've got the Vikings with Josh Dobbs. You have winnable games on your schedule. Today was another winnable game, and it goes to show, I'm with you, man. You cannot put out a losing product the rest of the season. Even as much as it helps your draft position, you cannot. So
right. I just know Cincinnati. You guys know Cincinnati too. If they start stringing up them losses, if there's one thing the Brown family hates, is they hate seeing empty seats. That is what I will say. I'll never forget that one time. If they win, they will show up. Like somebody put that up one time. They've got to find a way to win a game or two out of here. They can't go winless in this stretch. I just am more concerned with what that will do towards the players in the locker room if you go winless. It makes you, because at that point Zach Taylor's coaching record would be without Joe Burrow 4-30 something. So like that can't happen.
Yeah.
That can't happen. So I just think some changes will be on the horizon if this offense sputters and looks bad. Zach is missing out on our Super Bowl window. I think everyone will agree with me. I think that the Bengals Super Bowl window will be open as long as Joe Burrow is the quarterback and they have relatively good weapons on this team. But I do think that, hear me out. I think for all the talk that the Blackburns, Katie, Elizabeth, the Brown families have done about listening to the fan base, and we hear you and we listen to you, and they've gone through this whole change of, we're changing the scene in Cincinnati and game days and all that kind of stuff like that. You can't not do anything. You've made all these changes because you heard the fan base's outcry. You can't not do anything if the Bengals go winless and the offense is not able to even put up respectable numbers. You have to do something. If you say you listen to the fan base the way you do, see, that's the one caveat to making all these changes. Even all great teams make changes. Wink Martindale got fired from the Ravens. They didn't renew his contract or whatever it was. Like, changes happen. That's how teams stay afloat. Like, I think that, like I said, I think that changes are inevitable. And if they actually listen to the fan base the way that they say they do, they'll listen. And if the fan base is pissed off, changes will have to be made, even if it's not on a major scale. See, I don't think Zach Taylor needs to be let go. I think that's drastic. I think a major change would be making a shakeup on the offense, taking play calling duty, saying, hey, we need to hire an actual offense coordinator. I think that's a big enough shakeup. We've seen Pittsburgh do it time and time again. Todd Haley was a beast play caller for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they moved on from him because philosophical differences between him and Ben Roethlisberger. Changes happen. You know what I mean? Changes happen. It's a part of being human. But anyway, we want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright, the recap, obviously presented by First Star Logistics. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Appreciate all the passion, appreciate all the anger. It's what we do it for. And hopefully you guys vented and you got it all out of your system. And we can look ahead to Jacksonville. It's going to be a tough one. But you know what? I'll be there. That's all I can say. I don't know what the Bengals offense will be, but I will be there. But until then, guys, we will see you guys next time on the Sit Down with Malik Wright or the State of the Jungle. We're actually doing a special State of the Jungle, I believe, Tuesday. So make sure you guys keep it locked with us. We're doing it a day earlier because we had to pack up all the equipment and head out for the Jacksonville game. But yeah, we'll see you guys. Until next time.